and welcome back to our fifth and final instalment of a churchyard tour from St Margaret's Churchyard in Barking. And this one with its footstone fallen over, and quite newly fallen over as well, you can see by the whiteness there. In loving memory of Joseph John Raymond, who died the 23rd December 1903 in his 46th year. Also of Emily Drain, who died the 22nd of December 1875, aged 15 months. Also of Sarah Raymond, the beloved wife of the above named Joseph John Raymond, who died the 11th of March 1929 in her 90th year at rest. There are quite a few people that are buried in this churchyard lived to really ripe old ages. The slightly common misconception about the past is that people didn't live very long, and in London and the built up cities that was quite often very true, but out in the countryside here, which was in those days, this was the Essex countryside, you'd find that people could live to very great ages. And this is sacred to the memory of Joseph Grout of this parish, and he died in January 1849. And as you can see, the rest of the inscription is sadly lost to time and weathering. As are so many of the tombstones. The more exposed they are, the more worn down they are. Like this one here, you can see the top inscription is pretty much all but gone. The person was 30 years of age, but at the bottom you've got "and of the above named Elizabeth Thames, Thames, who departed this life January the 20th, 1745, aged 52 years. And you can see it's heavily carved on top as well. And gravestones, tombstones, headstones, whatever you wish to call them, are often carved with what to our ear is pretty morbid skulls and crossbones, and these are memento mori, which basically means remember to die. And it reminded the living that death was ever present, so behave yourself and try and live a decent life. And this one here, it's an interesting thing that happened about 5, maybe 8 years ago. This stone, which was on there, overnight got pulled off and put onto the floor here. No one knows why, whether they were trying to access the vault underneath, and they'd have to be very strong indeed to lift that up. And what they don't realise is that the vault is covered with a concrete slab, so their efforts, if they were up to grave robbing, were in vain. But it's in memory of Eliza Campbell, born the 24th of August 1827 and died the 13th of September 1877. Joseph McGregor Campbell, husband of the above, born the 24th of February 1824 and died the 18th of February 1895. And there is an inscription on the opposite side. Also of their children, Colin Campbell, born the 23rd of July 1860, died the 7th of August 1875, and Joseph McGregor Campbell, born the 20th of July 1859, and died on the 14th of April 1903. See, like with some of them, you can see ever so faint traces of their inscriptions. I do find these ones quite frustrating because I like to put names to people where possible. And this one is another one that's in the process of blistering away. Sacred to the memory of Thomas Hugh Collins of this parish, who departed this life on the 6th of August 1877, aged 72 years. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord, although part of it's gone. I do know what that says. You can praise me for my piety in the comments section if you wish. In remembrance of Anne Mary, the beloved wife of William Langley, who died August the 6th, 1886, aged 49 years. Weep not for me, my husband and children dear. I am not dead, but sleeping here, free from sorrow, free from pain, at rest. And I think that's until we meet again. Also William, husband of the above, who died on June the 28th, 1896, aged 68 years. And this is another one with names on front and back. In affectionate remembrance of the beloved children of the above. And this is the family grave of Richard Blidestein and Amelia Tyser. Blidestein and Tyser are Jewish surnames, so whether they were Jewish and just couldn't be buried in a Jewish cemetery, or they may well have converted to the Christian faith. People did back then. It made life easier, particularly if you were in trade. In affectionate remembrance of the beloved children of the above, who we've just discovered, Francis, who died the 20th of September 1854, aged 8 months. Also of Amelia Jarrett, who died the 19th of November 1854, aged 1 year and 11 months. Also of Sydney, died the 1st of October 1858, aged 1 year and 8 months. Also of Ellen, who died the 21st of December 1868, aged 9 years and 7 months. Also of Frederick William, who died the 21st of July 1870, aged 4 years and 3 months. I mean, how do you even begin to cope with the concept, which thankfully doesn't happen to the vast majority of parents nowadays, of losing not just one child but 5? I mean, that's unthinkable to us. I mean, back then it was all too common. And you've got James, the second son. He died January the 12th, 1883, aged 34 years. And also of Amelia, the beloved wife of Richard Tyser, Richard B. Tyser, that's Richard Blidestein Tyser, who died the 16th of June 1863, aged 54 years. And as Richard Blidestein Tyser isn't mentioned on this grave, we can only assume that he moved away or remarried. And for our next one, I'll take you over here. Watching where I walk, because people do let their dogs muck here and they don't always pick it up, and it's very embarrassing when you get on the bus and you sit there and you go, oh, I can smell shit, and you discover that it's you that smells of shit. In memory of Mr. George Cross, late of this parish, pork butcher. So like the parsons who were buried at the front of the churchyard over there, Mr. George Cross was also a pork butcher. Barking had several pork butchers in those days. It was quite a thriving little town. who departed this life March the 7th, 1796, and this is very well preserved, this one, aged 83 years. Also of Sarah, his wife, who departed this life February the 20th, 1790, aged 60 years. And near this place lieth Mrs. Mary Muntin, daughter of the above, who departed this life March the 29th, 1811, aged 50 years. Likewise 6 of their grandchildren, who died in their infancy. Also Mr. Edward Cross, late of this parish, pork butcher, who departed this life, and you can see it's blistered away, but it's an RY, so I think it's January or February the 23rd, 1828, and the rest of that, I'm afraid, is gone. And for our next one, you're going to join me just over there, and to get to them we have to walk past this one, which was restored quite badly a few years ago, using lots of concrete and bricks. But it's the thought that counts, I suppose. And it's to the Glennys that we're going, and for anyone that has been keeping an eye on my page with the monuments that are done inside the church, you'll remember a George Glenny. His monument is inside, and he is the son of one of the people we're going to be having a look at in a minute. Mrs. M. Glenny, relict of the above Mr. W. Glenny, died April the 22nd, 1861, aged 83 years. And Mr. Glenny is mentioned on there. Mr. William Glenny, covered over with moss, I'm afraid. But interestingly enough, not the pigeons trying to get it on, but the inscription that's on the side. Renovated by A and G Glenny, 1931. And this grave's been renovated a good few times over the years. This stone were renewed by Captain S. Glenny, 1886. And on the side here, much easier to read, restored by the widow and family of Major S. Glenny, 1912 and 1921. And these are interesting, these, because they've had in the past much newer stones added to them, the Glennys. Their stones either became damaged or so worn away that you couldn't read the inscriptions, and 20 or 30 years ago, when these were roughly done, it would have been a much easier process than getting this done nowadays. I do not think you'd be given permission to have this done nowadays. But in memory of Mrs. Anne Glenny of Whitechapel, who departed this life the 24th of December 1795, aged 55 years. Also the body of Mrs. Mary Berry, mother of the above, who died the 17th of March 1800, aged 75 years. Now these ones here, they would have had headstones, which you can just see bits of there, these coffin shapes. But this one here has JPH 1832, JH 1831, SH 1855 on its footstone, and another one that was replaced. And it's interesting because they're interesting links to the area. In memory of Mr. Alexander Glenny, who departed this life the 11th of January 1782, aged 57 years. Also of James, son of the above, who died the 18th of January 1769, aged 6 days. Also Mrs. Deborah Glenny, wife of the above, who departed this life the 9th of December 1804, aged 71 years. And it's their son, George Glenny, who never married, who was Justice of the Peace and Church Warden of St Margaret's, who has a memorial stone up on the wall inside the church. I'll pause you a minute while I get my information out. Alexander Glenny. The first record of the Glenny family in Barking is an entry in the rate book for September to December 1759, showing that Alexander Glenny was rated at £15 for Cobbler's Hall. This was a farmhouse built probably in the 18th century on or near the site of the great house called Wakering Place, alias Cobbler's Hall, erected in the reign of Queen Elizabeth I by William Nutbrown, but pulled down between 1653 and 1680. And Alexander Glenny, his occupation was, according to the family tradition, he was a farmer, market gardener from Scotland. But the family would later also go on to own a brewery as well. And Cobbler's Hall, although there's no pictures of the hall itself, is shown on a map, quite an early map as well. So we're going to go into that now, and any other information I can glean from online, from the online world. And you'll join me for that now, and then you'll join me afterwards for our last grave. And the Glenny family of Barking, they've been interesting to research, they have. Where they lived at Cobbler's Hall has taken me back to a period 100 years before their own, with this manorial map made for Thomas Fanshawe in the year 1653. Being pointed out with the arrow now is our beloved St Margaret's Church, and also Cobbler's Hall, which I'll be able to show to you in a much more close-up detail, with this zoom-in image showing Cobbler's Hall, which in the 17th century, when this map was made, was owned by the Oilis family, and they owned large swathes of Barking, were quite a wealthy family of Dutch extraction. They're buried inside St Margaret's Church. Their ledger stones on the floor are now covered up by the organ and choir stalls, so they're there, but you'll not be able to see them. But back to our Glennys. And this is the burial register for St Margaret's Parish Church, for the burial entry of Alexander Glenny, who was a farmer and market gardener. And he died on the 11th of January 1782, and was buried just a few days later on the 15th of January 1782. Such a quick burial in what was a cold month might suggest that he died of an infectious illness. Usually in the cold weather it would be 6 to 7 days between death and burial, but as you can see he was buried quite quickly, and they generally tended to do that with people that died of something infectious. As we can see from his wife's entry, another winter burial in a cold month, she was buried within the normal time period. Deborah Glenny died on the 9th of December 1804, aged 71, and she was buried 7 days later on the 16th of December 1804. So that shows up the difference between the husband and wife's burial, and does leave the question, did he die of anything infectious? And as I said, their son, George Glenny, he has his memorial up on the wall inside the church. And George Glenny was a lifelong bachelor. He never married and he never had any children, but he was a Justice of the Peace at Barking, and also a long-serving church warden at St Margaret's Church in Barking, which is probably what earned him this lovely memorial inside the church. Alexander and Deborah Glenny also had another son called William Glenny, who's a person that you can really admire, because William Glenny in his childhood was blinded. But for all that blindness, it never held him back, because he became quite a long-serving organist at St Margaret's Parish Church in Barking. And here we see the organ where it is nowadays, in the chancel area of the church. But back in William Glenny's day, bearing in mind he died in 1850, the organ was right up the other end of the church, where you'll now find the Armada font, which is below the belfry area and that. But back in 1850, as we can see when this image was roughly taken, the church was very different. The organ was up in a gallery, and the nave still retained its plasterwork ceiling, which you can still see the replication of inside the chancel area. But in the latter 19th century, they took all that plasterwork down, in the nave area to expose the wooden beams, the medieval wooden beams, and traces of the medieval painting above the chancel arch. Now, as we can see from this image, it was very different back in 1850, the church. It still retained its high box pews, so we know that the pews that we see today were put in sometime after 1850. And that's the church, as blind as he was, bless him, William Glenny would have known it. And as I say, for all that blindness, it never held him back, because William Glenny married, and he had a good number of children as well, dying on the 4th of April 1850, aged 83, and he was buried on the 10th of April 1850 in... You remember the box tomb we passed on the way to his parents' grave, the one that's been repaired and restored several times over the years by the Glennys? Well, that's where young and old William Glenny, who was blind pretty much most of his life, was buried. And it was through his descendants that Barking would get Glenny's Brewery Limited, which was at 18 Linton Road in Barking. The business was registered in November 1917 and registered by Thomas Wallace Glenny, who we can see on the left. And it was basically owned by Thomas Wallace Glenny and his brother George William Glenny. He was more of a silent partner though. George William Glenny Esquire, like our earlier George Glenny, was also a Justice of the Peace. And the business was acquired by Taylor Walker & Co. Limited in January 1930. But we can still see Glenny's Brewery when it was owned by Glenny's Limited in 1929 through these images. This is inside the brewery, once again in 1929. And this is the yard, and you can see these pretty early motor vehicles of Barking Brewery, 1929. And that, my friends, is the interesting Glenny family. Well, as we leave the Glennys and the sexually satiated pigeons behind, we go on to our next one. I've seen it all in this churchyard over the years. Pigeons doing the dirty is nothing. I've seen people do that here. A man not too long ago taking a dump right at the back of the churchyard, and was able to see every unpleasant detail of that as it even came out. It's like, oh no. This is intolerable. And this vault here is an interesting family with really strong links to Barking. Sacred to the memory of Scrymgeour Hewett, Scrymgeour Hewett, of this parish, and of the Short Blue Fleet. The Short Blue fishing fleet was one of Barking's greatest assets, really. I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. Who departed this life June the 17th, 1850, born in 1769. Also of Alexander Hewett of Cupar in Fife. Also of his wife Sarah Hewett, Wennell. Note the surname Wennell. Died 1811, aged 44 years. And Sarah Wennell's father, he started what was really the Short Blue Fleet with one fishing smack, and it led on to what would be a great industry for Barking. We'll be seeing some pictures and information about that as our historical segment. And of 4 of their infant children. Also to Thomas Hewett, who died 1861, aged 55 years, and also of Samuel Hewett. We're going to see a picture of this man in a bit. Of the Short Blue Fleet, died 1871, aged 73 years, son of Scrymgeour Hewett, and of his wife, Anne Hewett Moorhead, died 1841, aged 42 years, and of 5 of their infant children. Also of Anne, wife of George Farrer, their daughter, died 1848, aged 28 years. Also of Clarissa Hammock Hewett Levitt, that's the maiden surnames, second wife of Samuel Hewett, born 1811, died 1890, and of 4 of her infant children, and of Clarence John Hewett, born 1857, died in 1859. And at the foot of the grave is the family's crest or coat of arms, and you can see the family vault is now in Barking Cemetery, which I assume is the Ripple Road Cemetery. And there are more people mentioned on the side. Robert, infant son of Alice and Robert Muirhead Hewett, died 1884. Also Cyril, twin son of the above, born August the 27th, died August the 31st, 1895. And at the foot of the grave, in loving memory of Graham Scott Hewett, DSC, born the 5th of April 1889, died 2nd of August 1968. Clarice Scott Sanders, born 21st of December 1890, died the 2nd of February 1975. Douglas Scott Hewett, born the 6th of April 1893 and died the 7th of August 1981. And Mistletoe Scott, born the 8th of December 1900 and died the 28th of December 1985. And here you have Alan Hewett, died 2nd of the 3rd 2008, aged 77 years. Sail away. And now we're going to some information about the Hewetts, so you'll join me for that.
And the Hewett family and its extended branches have been an absolutely fascinating Barking family to research. They were really integral to Barking's industry and the fishing industry nationally as well. The Short Blue Fleet, and remember I said to you to bear the name Wennell in mind. The Short Blue Fleet was started in 1764 when James Wennell of Barking bought his first fishing smack. His son-in-law, Scrimgeour Hewett, took over the business upon his father-in-law's death, and the fleet remained in Hewett ownership until the last trawler was sold in the 1980s. And here we see the man himself, Scrimgeour Hewett, 1765 to 1840. He moved from Scotland to Barking in about 1795 and married the daughter of James Wennell, a local smack owner. James Wennell had owned fishing smacks since 1764. And how the Short Blue Fleet got its name was because of the small square blue flags flown by all the vessels in the fleet, and you can see it flying from the masthead in a couple of the images we're going to see in a minute. This is the real pioneer amongst the family, and he's often been described as a pioneer of the fishing industry. Samuel Hewett, Scrimgeour's second son, Samuel, was destined to become a banker like his elder brother, but he obviously had other ideas and ran away to sea while his father was away at the Napoleonic Wars, where he was an officially sanctioned privateer. So Scrimgeour was basically a sanctioned pirate preying on enemy French ships at the time. Upon Scrimgeour's return, Samuel was brought back home, and at the age of 14 was apprenticed to a fisherman, becoming a captain at 21. In 1815, Scrimgeour retired and handed over the fleet to Samuel. And this is a portrait painting of Samuel Hewett, 1797 to 1871, in his earlier years. He was the first person to use ice for the preservation of fish at sea. Ice at sea is still the main method of preserving fresh fish today, 120 plus years on. And here we can see Samuel Hewett in his old age. And this photo of Samuel Hewett was taken not long before he died in 1871. And he looks a lovely old chap, doesn't he? He's got a kindly face, shall we say. Samuel Hewett's father-in-law, who also played quite a large role in the short blue fleet was Robert Muirhead. Robert Muirhead, 1763 to 1831, was the father of Anne Hewett, Samuel's wife. And Anne Hewett herself. This is a fishing smack called the Anne Hewett, named for her. Launched in November 1836, the Anne Hewett joined the fleet that by the mid-19th century was the biggest fishing fleet in the world. The short blue fleet was based at Barking, the home port for over 100 fishing smacks in the 1830s. It's hard to believe it now, but at the time, the fishing smacks sailed up the Thames almost into the heart of London and unloaded their catch at Barking for sale at Billingsgate Fish Market. And this is a lovely painting, this one. The short blue fleet delivering to the cutter Don, built and owned by Samuel Hewett of Barking. And this painting is from 1860, painted by J.W. Green, image credit to Valence House Museum. And we get a little glimpse here of how the fleet got its name with the little flags flown atop the masthead. And bringing in these cutters, which were much faster ships, was Samuel's idea. And it was a clever idea as well, because it allowed the fleet to basically continually fish without having to worry about bringing the fish back home, because these cutters would go out to sea, meet them, and take on board the fish and take it back home, leaving the short blue fleet all the time in the world to catch its fish. The short blue fleet landed nearly all of its fish at Billingsgate during the 19th century, but Shadwell Market was set up and run by Robert Hewett between 1885 and 1899. And here we see Old Billingsgate, and this is from the graphic, January the 30th, 1875. And another fine painting, and by this era you can see that the Hewetts and the short blue fleet have gone into the era of steamships. And this is the steam carrier, the Wellesley. And this is a much better example of how the fleet got its name, by the little blue flags flown atop the masthead. And the Hewetts funded a couple of the stained glass windows in St Margaret's Church, and this is the Mariner's window that you'll find inside the Lady Chapel, and it features the names of several Hewetts and also Robert Muirhead as well. The Hewetts also funded the Fisherman's Window in the Fisherman's Chapel, which is also called the Youth Chapel. And this beautiful stained glass window was created by the renowned arts and crafts designer and architect George Jack. And as you can see from it, it features one of the short blue fleet with its little flag atop the mast. And this is Robert Peter Graham Hewett, 1920 to 2001, and he ran the business from the early 1960s until the end of the business in 1984. That's the Hewett family and the history of the short blue fleet, and I hope you found it as interesting as I did researching it.
That's the Hewett family vault, and that concludes our churchyard tour at St Margaret's Churchyard in Barking, and I hope you all found it interesting, and thanks for watching.